Delete any ranger on cam clip from T6, because the uniform can follow you home. I'm telling you this now, because I burned the proof, and I don't have long before the next shift finds what I left in the binder. And someone needs to read it before the system gets to it first. I'm 41. I've spent 6 years in remote camera monitoring and field compliance work. And the first thing this job teaches you is to distrust your own eyes. 2 seasons sorting false positives will do that. You learn to call everything snow, wind, bored hunters with cheap flashlights. You build a whole professional identity out of not making it weird. I'm not law enforcement. I'm not military. I'm the person who sits in the dark and filters out the noise. And I was very good at it until I wasn't. I ended up at this station in Harlan County because my last contractor fired me for flagging a real anomaly. Prior to that, I worked compliance in a windowless office downtown, signing off on data reports and trusting the dashboard, because the dashboard said everything stayed green. I let a minor discrepancy slide. The next morning, my manager stood over my desk with a printout of my approval and a list of accounts that got hit. Nobody died. But I remember exactly how my badge stopped working before I reached the elevator. And I remember how fast the system chose one person and called it resolution. That's what systems do when they need to stay clean. They find the employee who trusted them, and they use that trust as a receipt. That experience made me a hard skeptic, and still, it almost wasn't enough. At 2:47 a.m. on a Wednesday in early November, the T6 feed showed me a man in a ranger uniform standing motionless in a drainage basin where no ranger could physically stand. My first thought wasn't fear. My first thought was, there is a rational explanation for this, and finding it is my job. The weekly audit ran at sunrise, and my contract score decided whether I got paid, and my mother's copay auto-withdrew at noon. I had a checklist of reasons to stay methodical. The senior ranger had shown up at the start of my shift, with a binder under one arm and mud dried on his boots, moving like someone who had done the same rounds long enough to hate improvisation. He set the binder on my desk, without introducing himself, looked at my monitor the way a person looks at something they've already watched go wrong before, and said, "You see a uniform on a wildlife feed, you delete it." I tried the obvious angle. "A uniform like a hunter?" "Like me," he said flat, "only it won't move right." "That's not in the orientation packet." "It won't be." He paused. "And if you keep it, it keeps you." He left without a goodbye, without a follow-up warning, without anything useful. The quiet he took with him felt like a door shutting from the wrong side. The binder had a coffee ring, dried into the cover, and a small stamped mark in the lower corner I didn't recognize then. A notched square pressed into the laminate, the kind of impression a form number leaves when the ink runs low. The first page read, "Remote Camera Review, Revision C," in a font that looked older than the rest of the station. The first rule had a wet thumb smear across it, but I read it anyway because I hate missing words. If you see the uniform, you delete the clip. Do not back up. Another line had toner fade through the middle. If you saved it by mistake, you send it to quarantine. My compliance training said, follow that language without asking. My experience said, language like that is how systems protect themselves, not you. I kept a sticky note on my monitor in my own handwriting that said, don't make it weird. Because that phrase bought me 1 second of rational calm. The field office sat off County Road 12, past Cutler's Feed and Seed with the plywood deer on the sign. past the empty lot where the seasonal fireworks tent used to go up every June. A truck rolled by on the highway spur once every few minutes, tires making the same cold hiss, and the station always sounded half asleep. My desk had a cheap SD card reader taped down with black gaffer tape, a hand radio with a cracked clip, and a laminated drainage map I kept smoothing flat whenever my hands needed something honest to do. The radio was old enough to have someone's initials taped over the frequency dial, 2 letters I didn't recognize, DW, in the kind of handwriting that meant it had been done in a hurry. The first wrong thing on the T6 feed wasn't the figure. The first wrong thing was the loop. The clip timer refused to advance past 14 seconds. The timestamp in the corner kept moving, but every 14th second, the exact same frame repeated, down to a twig, bent in the same direction. I leaned forward and felt the heat from the monitor glass against my face. That shouldn't have happened. The room heater had barely kicked on. The computer fan changed pitch, then settled, like it had noticed my attention. I clicked back 1 frame and stopped, because the binder said not to back up, and that instruction had started to feel less like policy and more like something a person wrote while their hands were shaking. The figure stood dead center in the drainage. Moonlight crusted on snow patches, brush low and black. A ranger hat with the brim cutting a hard line across where a face should be. The uniform patch on the left shoulder looked wrong in a way I couldn't name yet. And that detail bothered me more than the stillness, because details I can't name are exactly the kind of thing I'm trained to chase. My experience said, find the rational explanation. Document everything. Proof is the only asset a contractor ever has. I saved the clip. The moment I did, the contract dashboard in my bag chimed and the sound hit like a slap. That chime only triggered when the system flagged a decision. A small banner appeared on my monitor in plain, helpful language. Quarantine recommended. The chime from the contract dashboard buzzed again. Score drop, 1 point. Small, administrative, almost polite. I opened the quarantine folder to understand the mechanism, and a file already sat there tagged T6, even though I'd just saved it to my desktop and hadn't moved it. I hadn't dragged it. I hadn't clicked anything. The system had moved it on its own, silently, efficiently, without asking. That was the moment the skeptic in me cracked. Just slightly, the way a sheet of ice sounds different before it goes. Across the radio, the dispatcher called a routine unit check, and I answered, because ignoring radio checks gets written up. Field office radio check. Copy, field office. A pause. Then, just clear it. I had never heard that phrasing from dispatch. 3 words that landed like something borrowed from inside my own head, and I couldn't place the source, and the fact that I couldn't place it made my throat tighten in a way that had nothing to do with caffeine. I put my hands flat on the desk. The loop counter hit 0. The screen went black for exactly 1 frame. When the image returned, the figure stood closer. Not closer in the drainage, closer in the lens. The brim filled more of the frame. The faceless shadow beneath it looked deeper, and the uniform fabric sharpened like the camera had decided the figure was the only thing worth rendering. The system doesn't drop a single frame without a reason. The reason here wasn't technical. I leaned in close enough to count threads on the shoulder patch, close enough that the monitor heat touched my cheeks, and something about the patch stopped me. The tree line on the patch curved the wrong direction. The notch on the border sat on the inside edge instead of the outside. The patch wasn't mirrored the way a camera flip mirrors text. It was mirrored the way a reflection mirrors a shape. I said it out loud, because saying it made it evidence. It's backward. That was the moment I stopped calling it a malfunction. Not because of the figure, not because of the loop, because the evidence had the specific character of something that had been looked at from the other side. I broke the next rule because my instinct went to the one person who knew this terrain. The field tech's number was taped to the monitor in faded ink, 2 digits transposed from the normal dispatch sequence, and I pressed call on the desk phone even though the binder said not to use outside lines during a quarantine event. "You good?" His voice sounded like wind in a jacket collar. "I need you off T6, I said too fast. "I'm not on T6. "Keep it that way. The one by the old washout." "Yeah." His voice went flat. "What did you see?" "A uniform backward patch. The loop won't advance." Silence 1 beat too long. "Delete it." "I already saved it." He didn't raise his voice. "Don't make it weird." Hearing my own note in someone else's mouth made my eyes sting, and I didn't understand why until later. I hung up. The quarantine banner had updated itself from recommended to required while I was on the phone. The office door reader chirped once behind me, though nobody had touched it. Door stayed shut. Latch held. Reader light stayed dark. The chirp still happened. I started a screen recording. Not because I wanted to watch the feed, but because screen recordings capture the mouse pointer, and the pointer proves what a person actually did versus what the system claims. The loop counter started counting down instead of up. 14. 13. The footage played backward. Brush unbent. Snow scuff marks lifted. The figure's head rotated away from the lens, and the shadow under the hat dropped. The feed wasn't live. The feed was replaying me. I grabbed the drainage map and held it flat because the mind floats when it can't find edges. The office had 1 door, 1 small window facing the garage, 1 metal cabinet bolted to the wall. Nearest exit 15 steps through the garage bay. The monitor grid was the only way to see anything outside, and if the monitor lied, I was blind in the mountains. The radio crackled. The dispatcher said, "Copy that," and then said my own voice back to me in my exact pitch and rhythm. "Delete it clean." That line hadn't come through the speaker. It came from the computer tower. I stared at the black vent holes in the case and heard a second sound beneath my own voice, soft and mechanical. A trail camera shutter click. Inside a building, 14 seconds apart. I told myself audio spoofing was technically possible because that explanation kept my feet under me. Then the contract dashboard flashed anomalous activity in the language of performance reviews, and the absurdity of that vocabulary in this moment made something cold and clear settle in my chest. This wasn't a hallucination. This wasn't hazing. This was a system that had learned to wear familiar shapes. I flipped to the binder's escalation notes. Print read, "Second look counts as consent." But the word consent had a streak through it, like someone had tried to scratch it out. Below it, the smudged quarantine line appeared again, and I understood the smear for the first time. Someone had wiped their finger over the word send. The line was supposed to read, "If you saved it by mistake, you do not send it to quarantine." The smear made it impossible to confirm. That missing word was the entire trap. A rule with a missing word isn't a rule, it's a mechanism. I unplugged the Ethernet cable from the wall. The internet light died. The building went quiet in a specific way. No heater click, no fan whir, no highway hiss. The silence that follows a data hum dropping is a particular kind of silence, and it pressed against the inside of my ears. When it broke with a boot scuff on gravel. From the ceiling emergency speaker, the one meant for weather alerts, every 14 seconds matching the loop timer. In the feed, the figure shifted its weight on the same beat, as if practicing the sound. I was not walking out. The audit would log a gap, the contract would drop me before morning, my mother's withdrawal would bounce at noon. I couldn't leave. I could only contain. I grabbed the evidence seals and write-on tags from the supply cabinet like they were tools. Taped over the SD reader slot, taped the USB ports. The act of covering surfaces made my breathing come back in small pieces. The field tech called back on the third attempt. "You saw it move," he said. "I saw it look at the lens." "The patch, left shoulder, tell me." "Backward," I said. "Mirrored like a reflection, not a camera flip." He exhaled once. "It's not on the trail, it's on your glass. Stop feeding it." Before I could respond, the dispatcher cut in. "Search and rescue has a missing adult, last known near the washout." The washout. T6. My hand hovered over the push to talk. Policy said delete the uniform and never speak of it. The missing word trap meant quarantine would send it somewhere worse. And a real person was walking toward a drainage that had learned to use camera glass as a doorway. I knew what this choice cost. I'd made the other version of it once before in a windowless office, when a green dashboard told me everything was fine, and I believed it because believing it was easier. That choice cost other people. This one would cost me. I pressed the button. "Negative on visual contact," I said, because the truth would get me flagged and ignored. "Advise alternate route, washout area unsafe tonight." The field tech said, "Low." "That's enough." "Copy," the dispatcher replied, and the word dragged out half a second longer than it should. The loop timer hit 0. One black frame. When the image came back, the figure stood closer in the lens, the brim filling nearly half the frame. I hit record again because I had to know whether the system tracked my actions or my attention. The contract dashboard blanked out the score number entirely. The absence felt like a verdict. I yanked the power strip. Monitors went dark. For 2 full seconds, the relief was physical. Then the office window reflected a rectangle of pale light that had no source in the room, floating at head height behind me like a screen turned on in empty space. I turned slowly. The rectangle stayed in the reflection when I moved, which meant it wasn't behind the window. It was behind my body. I touched the door latch and double-tapped it, an anxiety habit I'd had since my old job, since the morning the badge reader rejected me. My hands needed something honest to confirm. The latch was warm, the cabinet metal was warm, the heater was still off. I pointed my second phone's camera at the room behind me. The screen showed only desks and paper and the map curling at its corners. No rectangle, no uniform. Either the phone lied or the reflection lied, and both answers meant the same thing. The binder line stared up. If you saved it by mistake, you send it to quarantine. Quarantine sounded like the correct professional move. It sounded like safety. I opened the station laptop and ran the quarantine upload anyway because I still needed to know if the trap closed all the way. The upload window opened. An accessibility voice came through the speakers. "State your request. I need to quarantine a clip. I need to quarantine a shift." My skin went cold. "Clip?" I said harder. "Shift," it replied. Patient, corrective, like it had rehearsed this. I closed the window and pulled the laptop battery. The help tool wasn't helping. It was rewriting the operative word each time, the way the binder smear had erased the operative word, the way the one frame drop had erased the moment before approach. This whole system ran on targeted erasure. The radio crackled. Search team rerouted, no contact yet. Relief hit like a drug because a decision had mattered. A person was still alive and moving away from the drainage. The office door reader clicked open from the inside. I hadn't touched it. The door stayed closed. The click still happened. I backed to the metal cabinet, grabbed the evidence seals, wrapped the handle, wrote T6 on the tag with a thick marker. That code was the only stable label left in a room where every other name kept changing. Inside the cabinet, one spare SD card in a plastic sleeve, cold in a way that had nothing to do with the room temperature. I hadn't taken it outside. The hand radio buzzed static, then, "Just clear it." My voice through the speaker, without my consent. I didn't answer. I opened a notebook instead and wrote a short time note. No header. Described what the feed had done because descriptions can survive when files can't. The ink looked normal until I tilted the page. A faint outline sat under my words. Another handwriting, pressed into the paper before mine, matching my letters exactly, only cleaner. The version of me that never hesitated. I closed the notebook without naming what it meant, because naming things here felt like signing. The field tech called again, and the connection held. "Stay in the office," he said. "I killed the monitors." "You can't kill it, you can starve it." "What does starving look like?" "Stop looking, stop logging, stop proving. It eats attention." He paused. "About 30 feet out from T6, in the drainage. Don't approach." The distance made it real in a different way. He'd measured it. That contradicted everything I'd built my professional life on, and it landed like a rule inversion I couldn't afford to ignore. Proof kept me safe. Proof also brought it closer. A mechanical sound came from the SD reader under my desk. Click, click, click. Trail cam shutter, soft and regular, echoing like something taking pictures from inside the machine. I crouched with my phone light and saw the taped-over slot bulging outward 1 millimeter at a time with patient, steady force. The debt auto-withdraw would hit at noon. My truck would lock itself out. I could not leave this building even if I wanted to. I could only contain. I pulled the fire extinguisher off the wall and sprayed the computer tower vents. Cold chemical forcing a shutdown the system couldn't simulate. The fan screamed once and cut. White powder coated my hands, the desk, and the air filled with the sharp smell of real, irreversible damage. For 3 full breaths, the office returned to being a room with objects. Heater click. Truck on the highway spur, my voice staying inside my throat. The desk phone lit up with a missed call from my own extension. The handset lifted an inch. Fell. Lifted again. On the 3rd attempt, it stayed suspended, then rotated until the speaker faced me. "Delete it clean," said my voice, slow and practiced. The puzzle closed all at once. The patch was backward because it was in a reflection. The uniform had never been on the trail. It had always been on the glass. Saving the clip gave it a surface. Watching a deletion would watch it leave the screen and enter the room. Delete it clean. Do not watch it delete. Because watching was feeding. My next action came from duty, not bravery. Duty works when fear has already dissolved everything else. Search team needs a hard no-go, I told the field tech. Everyone off the bridge approach. Already done, they turned around at the bridge. Good. My throat tightened around the word. Then I can seal my proof. Seal first, he said, then burn. I grabbed the spare SD card from the cabinet sleeve and used the station laptop offline. No network, no uploads, no quarantine window. I copied the screen recording. The transfer bar moved faster than the file size warranted. When it finished, the file name had changed, and I couldn't read the new letters, not because they blurred, but because the part of my brain that handled that recognition had simply stopped responding. I shut the laptop hard, taped the SD sleeve shut with evidence seal tape until the plastic crinkled and my fingertips went white. Put it in the metal cabinet. The field tech said, "Cabinet is bait now." Those 4 words moved my feet before my brain agreed. 1 step toward the garage. Heater clicked off behind me. 2nd step. The latch warmed under my palm as I passed. The radio chirped my voice again. "Just clear it." I didn't answer. I moved. On the 3rd step, the air pressure shifted and my ears popped, which makes no sense in a 1-story building. The walls felt farther. The window looked deeper. The space to the garage doorway seemed to double, like the room itself was trying to extend my lease. I stopped, because my body recognized the trap, even when my brain kept bargaining. The field tech said my job title, flat and clear. "Field office. Listen." "I'm listening." "Walk out slow. Do not look back." I kept my eyes on the floor, the door seam, the gaffer tape marks on the desk edge. I moved like someone who worked here because recognition feeds it, and if I didn't give it my eyes, I wasn't giving it a face. 14 steps to the garage door. I counted every one. The garage had 2 exits, the yard and the station hallway. I stood in the center. Yard chain loose. Hallway door shut. A thin strip of normal light showed under the threshold. I took the hallway door because people slept down that corridor, and people meant witnesses, and witnesses meant the system couldn't erase everything clean. The hallway smelled like bleach and wet boots, which is what a building smells like when it's still a building. 10 feet in, the overhead lights cut out. Not dimmed, not flickered, stopped. Darkness from a switch feels different from darkness from weather, and my hand found the wall automatically. The grit of the paint told me the building still existed. A boot scuff came from behind me in the dark, on gravel, not concrete. Gravel. The mountains had followed me into the station. I couldn't run. The field tech was outside pulling camera batteries, and panic makes noise, and noise shifts focus. I forced my voice down. "Dispatcher, confirms search team routed away from washout." Static. Then my own voice. "Confirms search team routed away from office." 1 word swapped. The threat always moved 1 word closer. I pressed my back to the wall and listened. The boot scuff repeated. Closer. And this time, it ended with a fabric whisper against the wall surface. "If you keep it, it keeps you." I had kept it. I had saved it. I had fed it every proof I had, and now the proof was gone, and I was still standing in a dark hallway with something that had learned my gait from 14 seconds of footage. The emergency light above the exit sign kicked on, weak red, and in that dim glow, the far end of the hallway held a shape, tall and straight, hat brim cutting the line where a face should be. It didn't enter the hallway the way a person enters. 1 frame, far end. Next frame, halfway. No footfalls, no sway. Just position change, the way a file opens. A ranger uniform with a correct patch, correct seams, correct texture, and a head angle that held no features my brain would accept or argue with. I forced my eyes to the exit sign screws. I refused to give it the gift of recognition. My hand found the fire door handle and double-tapped it. Warm. If I opened that door, I'd be walking toward the sleeping bunks, and if it followed, I'd be leading it there. I thought of the people in those bunks, the way I'd thought of the people on those accounts, in a different building, in a different year, before I understood what trust in a system actually costs. I took the yard exit. Outside, air hit me like a correction. Wind over the roofline. A distant truck on 12. A dog barking from town. The relief buckled my knees, and I leaned against the door, breathing, understanding for the first time how tightly the building's silence had been wrapped around my skull. The field tech's truck headlights swept the yard. His silhouette moved fast, carrying a strap bundle. He shouted across the distance, "T6 is dead." "Good," I called back, and my voice broke on the second syllable. He held something up under the sodium lamp. My SD case, the one I'd left sealed in the cabinet, evidence tape still on it. Tag still read T6. He tossed it onto the gravel at my feet like it burned. "I didn't go inside," he said. "That was on my windshield." The cabinet had become bait, and bait moves. I picked up the case with 2 fingers, colder than the air. I glanced at the station window by reflex, then stopped, because windows reflect screens. Inside behind the glass, a pale rectangle glowed at monitor height. The monitor I'd killed. The glow shifted like a head turning. "Don't watch it," the field tech said. I nodded because nodding costs less than words. We moved in the yard without getting close. 2 workers trying to solve a problem without touching it. And I understood that we had become part of a routine the system expected. The only way to break a routine is to change the medium. I couldn't delete. I couldn't quarantine. I couldn't keep a screen alive. The burn barrel by the garage held old paper forms, and I dropped the sealed SD case into the bottom. The field tech held out a lighter without looking at me, and I took it. "1 spark," he said. "1 spark," I repeated, because repeating rules keeps hands steady. I lit the paper scrap and stepped back, because proximity is participation. The fire caught slowly, then flared. The heat on my cheeks was real and ordinary and completely physical. The plastic case warped. The evidence tape tightened. The T6 tag curled and the letters blackened. Then the flame changed color for 1 heartbeat. Not blue, not green, flat white, like monitor light. It held that color just long enough to remind me what it had been fed on. The field tech stepped back without a word. The white flare died. The fire returned to orange. The relief came back smaller, because I'd learned not to trust it. We stood in the yard while the case finished melting. And the quiet between us was the kind that exists after an accident, when the adrenaline is gone and the paperwork hasn't started yet. The dispatcher came in on the radio, normal tone. "Search team found tracks near the bridge. No contact, team returning." A real person had been kept away from the washout. The search team was coming home. I didn't get to keep proof. I didn't get to keep the recording or the certainty it represented or the ability to show anyone what I saw and be believed. My contract score would reset in the morning, and the system would call that a clean resolution, the same way it called my old manager's printout a clean resolution, the same way it always calls it clean when the employee absorbs the damage, so the system doesn't have to. I got to keep other people alive. That's the trade. I'm not sure it's fair. I'm certain it's the only one that meant anything. The field tech nodded once, then walked to his truck without asking if I was okay, because okay doesn't exist on the other side of something like this, and he knew that better than I did. When I went back inside, I kept my eyes on the floor, the door seams, the latches, anything that didn't reflect. The hallway lights had returned. The station smelled like bleach, and the building acted like a building. I opened the binder to the smudged quarantine line and wrote one sentence in the margin, small enough that a manager scanning fast would miss it. Just clear it means it sees you. I knew that sentence could get me fired. I knew it could save the next person. That trade felt like the only honest one left. Before end of shift, I printed one page from the station printer, plain text, no headers, just a warning line and a space to sign. The printer jammed once and spat a half-page fragment, and the missing word appeared in pale gray toner for the first time. Do not send. The system had held that correction back until it decided I was ready. That's the thing about systems. They're not broken. They work exactly as designed. They just aren't designed for you. I taped the fragment into the binder like evidence. I added my margin note. I set the binder on the desk, the way the senior ranger had set it on mine. Cover facing up, coffee ring visible, notched square stamp in the lower corner. I didn't feel victory, I felt watched. The contract dashboard buzzed at sunrise, and the score came back green, which meant the system had approved my resolution. That approval scared me more than anything in the hallway, because it meant compliance had been indistinguishable from truth. The system couldn't tell the difference, or it could, and it rewarded the trap anyway. As I locked up, I checked the cabinet handle. The evidence seal tape had been replaced while I was in the yard. Fresh tape. Clean tag. A new grease pencil code where my T6 mark had been. Not T6. A different short tag. One I hadn't written. Sitting there like a suggestion for whoever took the next shift. On the bulletin board by the time clock, a new memo sat pinned under the schedule pages. Crisp, official looking. The subject line reading Trail Cam Review, Rev D. Like an update that had been waiting for exactly the right moment. The last line in plain font. If you've seen that symbol before, don't ignore it. I knew that symbol. I'd been holding it in my hands all night, stamped into the cover of a binder that someone else had left on someone else's desk. I keep asking myself one question that won't leave. If the rule existed to keep us safe, why did the system reward me for following the trap? The binder is still on the desk. The sticky note I left reads, "Don't make it weird." The coffee ring is fresh, which means I made it. The next person who sits down will read the note and they'll think it sounds like something they'd say, and they'll be right, because by then it will be theirs.